So I apologize if I go over some old grind with you, but I am interested. I always like to know how people, we're all in the playground in school, and we all come out, we all become runners and things like that. And I always like to know how a person become gets to where they are now, and why is that any different than anybody else. So just a little bit of an introduction into the story and how you got into running.
Yeah, so I think with a lot of ultra runners, you probably class me as an ultra runner, a bit of a late starter to running. If you're, if you've gone through the ranks when you were younger at school and you're naturally gifted at it, I think you've got a better chance of hanging around in sport and you might run typical 5K, 10K, half marathon, and you have the traditional journey. I didn't have any of that. Um, like in high, I remember the last, I've told this story before, but the last year of primary school, that we had like the mini marathon, and that's my first running memory. So we had the mini marathon, a couple of laps around the school field of a primary school. But I remember before it, I was the only lad in my year. The school was so small. Um, so there's me, bunch of girls. I'm basically bunching the girls, yeah, which is probably, well, it was, yeah, it's probably way ahead of its time now, I guess. But I also had the lads below me, we were in a little, it was like a little gang meeting. I had a little piece of paper and I gave them instructions of what to do in the mini marathon so that I could win, basically. So they had to cross over, I had to be out the front. You just, so I always think back to that time of thinking maybe I did have a bit of competitive streak in me because I definitely
Yeah,
wanted to, I
maybe.
wanted to win that. Well, yeah, but then it kind of, you get lost. I was a typical, love playing the footy. I loved being part of the group. I loved having a laugh. And it was the social thing, but also just getting out and being around the lads 3 or 4 times a week. So that was me in high school, really. Um, and all the way up until I was 17, 18, playing like a decent level on a Saturday. And then on a Sunday, our Sunday league team was, again, won the league a few times and things, but it was never taken seriously. Like the step above, you'd probably say was semi-pro, but we weren't interested in that. We would be going out, having drinks, 3 nights, 4 nights a week, along with it all, and I loved that. So
It's called life.
yeah, for me, running, well, yeah, exactly, yeah, yeah. And being part of a team sport was brilliant. I was completely average, being dragged along by some really talented lads, if I'm honest. Um, I always thought I was a little bit better than I probably was looking back because I was in a decent team. Um, but there was the odd time that I can think back. There was like at one point we used to do like typical athletic stuff in high school, and walking off the field one time, I was trying to do, I think it was the 200 meters, yeah, because that was quite cool back then. Yeah, the sporty lads were just, it was, yeah, it's just survival of the fittest then, isn't it? But I was crap at it. And I remember my school teacher saying, "You're built like a long distance runner, you should do that," kind of thing. And it was water off a duck's back, didn't think of it. But it did hang around because I was quite short, skinny, and by then some of the lads had beards, and they were winning the 200 meters. Like knowing what I know now, I know why. Um, and then again, cross country came along, and just because nobody really wanted to do the cross country, I would finish third, and then I would get a day out of school, and then I would do okay in that, and I would get to go to South Wales, and I'm in North Wales, so I'd have 2 days off school. So it was kind of, it was just, I didn't know, I wasn't particularly, again, I wasn't naturally gifted, but it was a bit of a way in for something that I could be good at rather than being in the team and just dragged along with the others. Yeah, I was never the goal scorer. I was never the playmaker. I was just solid. Um, so yeah, and then it kind of again it just drifts off. Like I said, I was in 17, 18, 19, 20, playing football solidly until I moved to Manchester for work. And again, my group of friends, and we're still a good group of friends now. Um, we did everything together, going out, playing football, and all that kind of thing. So I moved to Manchester and didn't know a soul, and that was like a personal choice. But I also didn't have any money, and I used to like to keep fit, but I couldn't go to the gym because I didn't have any money. Didn't know anybody, so I couldn't play football. Yeah, just walking into a Manchester pub team didn't really. It was just, yeah, it wasn't really a thing. So I just started running down the canal. in Manchester. And back then, I think I was lucky enough that there was no Instagram, social media. I didn't even have a watch. I remember looking at what time it was when I left the shared house, and then when I got back, I'd always look at the clock and go, "Oh, I went a little bit further today." Um, and if I was honest, looking back, I was avoiding the housemates at first because I was the youngest one, and we were all workers. It wasn't like a uni thing. Um, there's a couple of people from different cultures, different backgrounds, different workplaces, and I've come from a small town in North Wales. I think at the time I was just running down the canal to avoid speaking to them a lot. Um, Things changed, but the first couple of experiences was just horrendous because I was in my Sunday league kit, and you'd get an old guy running past you. I was like, well, I'm a fit lad. Why is this 60-year-old guy charging past me? Um, and that's kind of what kicked off the learning part as well, out of frustration. And so then it was a bit like I was reading every magazine I could in work. I was reading books in work. I was listening to audio stuff, and I was getting, and it was starting to outweigh what I was doing at work, if that makes sense. I resented going to work because I could have been doing this or that. And it just got to a point where some people in work were asking me for some running advice, but I'd not even entered a race. This is how ridiculous it was. Um, and I would do that. And then I met a girl. I met a girl that lived in Leicester and I lived in Manchester. So for us, that's kind of long distance relationship. Um, Went on a couple of dates and met up, kind of thing. But again, you couldn't really see her that often. So I entered the Leicester Half Marathon because in my head, one, that'll impress her. Two, that's where I'll have to stay. So, and that was kind of it. That was my first race, Leicester Half Marathon, trying to impress a girl and trying to basically stay at a house for the weekend. And now we're married, two kids, running is my business, done okay at it. And that's when someone asks me that question, it's like a 10-minute answer. But
Yeah,
yeah, that
running.
was,
It's like running is the glue of everything, isn't
hmm,
it? Really, in essence. What
yeah.
time did you get in that half marathon? Like, how hard were you trying to
Do you know,
impress her?
oh, was trying very hard, and then in the first 5 minutes, I realized as soon as she's out of eyesight, you think, "Oh my god." um, it was something like it was in the 140s or something like that. Yeah. Um, which again, like looking back, I thought that was an amazing time. It wasn't like I was big headed about it, but because I'd never done. I didn't know my times. That was the first time anything of my race running had been timed, apart from me looking at that clock.
It's
Um,
all relative, though, isn't it?
yeah, yeah. I remember trying to get past again. I say an old guy now, but he's probably about 40. I'm pushing 40. So I remember going past him in the last 400 meters like it was the Olympics, and him shouting at me um, about my lace being untied. Yeah, and there was there was not a chance I was stopping to do my lace because in my head I was like I was getting past him, and yeah, God knows what position it was, the Leicester Half Marathon, an hour 40 something. And I just remember I could hardly walk back to the bus. So what I was thinking, I'll stay at this girl's house for the weekend. It was it was pointless anyway. I could hardly walk. I had my Nike Air Max on, but again, it was like I remember waking up. I was in work that week just thinking I need to get better at that because
Mm.
because why is everyone else in my head? It was why is everyone else better at it kind of thing. Um, yeah, and that was like I always say that's the start of when I started running. Then, yeah.
I remember my first half marathon. I was going for 8:30s, and I'd spent like a week in the sauna because I had a bit of a niggle, and I had all these ghost pains up and down my body, which I didn't realize were ghost pains at that time. And I totally dehydrated myself before the race, but I managed to get over. I'll never forget mile 11 running past a wine gum on the ground and regretting not having picked it up. I was so bunked. And I crossed the line and it was 150, 130. Like, and at this running club come and took me on a seat and I was pure grey. And I couldn't believe that I'd hit 151. Like, it was such a fast time, like, you know. And I remember my wife actually turning my kids, they were about 5 or 6 at the time, turning their heads away because I looked so bad at the finish line. But when you start, it's very similar as well. It's funny when you were talking there about your mini marathon around school, and you were talking. You can tell you're a deep thinker, and you like unpacking things and understand what's going on and why it's actually happening. That's a little sort of indicator. That's the way your mindset works. And I was the same. And it can be very difficult at the beginning, can't it? Because like, I used to have a 10-mile loop, and I went out with a Powerade, 6 jelly beans, a gel, because the magazines that I was picking up, is all this false rubbish out there, really, and all this advertising. Like, it takes there's such a sharp learning point from that place of your 140 half, isn't there, to where you are now. The first couple of years is just like, whoa, like you have to wade through all of the crap that's out there.
Yeah, and it's almost like a necessity, I think, because even more so these days it's more difficult. But back then, I think it's not that long ago, is it? But you only really had the magazines and the books and things, so at least there was some kind of underlying kind of advice there. Yeah. So some things, it's not. I give things like Runner's World and things a hard time, and I've done it in the past, for regurgitation for the adverts things. But there would be the odd article, and I would learn things from more about reading about people's experiences or reading a running biography than I would about what is the best session for this, that kind of thing. Yeah. So I think it's just the way that someone's inclined. Like for me, I mean, at the time when I was in it, I was loving reading every single magazine. Yeah, it's only when you get through the other side and you're like, hang on a minute, and you start to question it a bit more yourself, then and you make those kind of mistakes. Like there was like something that you read about being fat adapted. I remember reading about being fat adapted. This is fast forward. I was doing okay at this point, but I was again naive to nutrition and strength and all the things that really matter. And I read a article about being fat adapted, and I went into 100+ mile race thinking I could just eat nuts, kind of thing. Yeah, which obviously is it's yeah, it's not gonna end well, and it didn't end well, kind of thing. Yeah, but I think something like that experience served me well because it was like, wait a minute, that was horrendous kind of strategy, advice, or whatever. Whether there's a difference between someone giving just blatant wrong advice or me, the person, reading something and getting something wrong or different from it, I think. Um, which again just adds to confusion. Luckily, these days, there are people that you can go to and explore yourselves. But again, I always count myself lucky that it was before social media, and I don't want to sound like a couple of miserable old guys and stuff, but I didn't have Instagram run people telling me what to do and this that kind of thing. I didn't have that. I just had the people around me, the odd weird kind of running forum on the internet, and that was it really.
I think it's really exploded the last, I would say, couple of years. The information, more not direct, but more valued sort of information in the last couple of years. When we have the likes of podcasts and things like that, especially, you really get to unpack those things because we all were reading the magazines, and it's a very difficult thing because we all know how individual we are. But I do think that, like my previous life, I was a quality manager in the aerospace industry, and I learned so much and gained so much experience from things going wrong. And like when the world was great, and nothing was going wrong, you weren't actually learning anything. You were just going through the motions. So I think it's an important path, actually, to actually that trial and error and learning what works and what doesn't. And I think, I know we had Martin Cox on the podcast a couple of weeks ago. I don't want to mention him yet because I'm going to get to there. But it's one thing that he said, it's like, listen to me, I made all the mistakes. And it's like, exactly, that's what makes you such a good coach or such a good runner, is because you've done it all yourself.
Yeah, there is an element of that. It's like, right, like I'm 37. I still think that's young. Yeah, I still think Martin's young, that kind of thing. But at kind of 25, could I coach people like I'm coaching now and help people? No, not absolutely not. I don't think I could coach people if I'd had a clear progression path and I was an Olympic athlete at 25. Just haven't. For me, coaching is more about life experience as well, more than the training plan. Yeah, we can all go and do a course and pass a test to say that I can give you a training plan. It's like it almost doesn't mean too much to me, that.
Especially the mindset aspect of it. When you were talking
Yeah,
there about, when I was talking about that, when we were talking about reading magazines, I talked about that 10-mile run where I had the Powerade, etc. I went for a 10-mile race in Dublin and I blew up. And the reason why I blew up was because I had a heart rate monitor on, and my heart rate was 20 beats up at the start of the race. And that just
yeah,
threw my head. It's just like, geez, I'm 20
yeah,
beats up already. I want to stay at this level. So the whole way around, as soon as I started, I was like 165. My heart rate, it was way too high. So I blew up at mile 8. So I went out on this 10-mile loop then 2 days later, really annoyed that I'd stopped and walked at mile 8. No gels, no jelly babies, no Powerade. I just went out, not even any water. And I knocked about 5
yeah,
minutes off my PB. And it never,
yeah,
and because I was chasing after that demon, like, where are you? I wanted to confront him again. And it never appeared because I was chasing after
yeah,
it rather than running away from it. It was a real big lesson. This was in my first 6 months of running, about how it really made me start to question and how much of this is mental and how much of this is actually physical or what's going on. And
yeah,
I loved
yeah.
unpacking that. You don't pick that up from magazines, but a coach can
No,
guide you through those things.
yeah. I think like a good coach can almost tell you what you could expect, that kind of thing. Yeah, it's not that this will definitely happen. It's just that you could expect this. It's like, because what do we do as a runner? We would plan if you're a planner, you'll plan your sessions, you'll follow a plan, you'll think, what's the best for this? What's the best advice for this? What are the best exercises for my strength? On race day, how many races do you have where everything goes when it's your best race? Yeah, very, very rarely happens. So it's like, well, so I'll question them. It's like, what are you going to do if this turns to shit? Or what are you going to do if this happens? Or what are you going to do in this situation? And it's much more important that they have. I'm talking more ultra running, but also marathon as well, kind of thing. Like someone like Martin will give me invaluable advice. You will probably at some point you might feel like this. So forget about technique almost, and your arms will be pump those arms, that kind of thing, yeah, which override the advice or whatever I might be doing at the time. So for me, in giving this advice for an ultra run, it's like, well, yes, you might have this dip in energy, or you might have this low time. It's like at the end of the day, like you're gonna be. I heard this great saying once. It was like at the end of it all, you will be in bed at the end of the day. Yeah. So just like come into yourself a little bit more and think, how can I just go forward a little bit more? Yeah. And if you've already figured out some possibilities of this, it makes it a little bit easier. That's what I found anyway. When I was just winging it, yeah, I'd have a good day or I might have a bad day, but you can eliminate a lot of just about the rubbish thoughts almost by almost like preempting them, because you will always get it. You can't stop it. Yeah.
I find there's two words coming into my head there, and it's acceptance or resistance.
Yeah.
And no matter
Mm.
what you're going through, if you're able to accept that, then you'll be able to keep on moving forward. But that moment that you start resisting it and start feeling sorry for yourself, it just amplifies, doesn't it? Like, and your mind just focuses on that, and it makes
Yeah.
that is a deep hole, and you start to go down.
Well,
And
if you've got a little bit of grit in your shoe, what are you focusing on? Yeah. So what makes more sense? Just stop for 30 seconds, get that bit of grit out, or think about that bit of grit in your shoe for the next 50 miles, which what some people will do and almost wear it as a badge of honor. I gritted my teeth and I did this. It's like, well, you can stop and just check yourself or whatever it is. Yeah.
and that, when you mentioned the quote there about at the end of the day you're going to be in your bed, there's that element of patience, isn't there? It's like, this time is going to
Yeah.
pass no matter what. That's what it's
Yeah.
really saying. And if you're just patient, as long as you can, like, am I able to move one foot in front of the other or not? Well, actually, You know,
Yeah.
99 times out of 100, you can at least do that, no matter what pace it is. You can move forward. Um, and it may not be at the speed that you want. It's that acceptance thing is, again, this race, tomorrow the race is going to be over. Do you know what I mean? Like, just keep moving
Mm.
forward and be patient. You'll get there eventually. And that really is, in essence, real long endurance races. That's what it's all about, isn't it? Just being patient, sort of staying in the present moment, not focusing too
Yeah.
far
Yeah.
ahead, and accepting all the pain and embrace it. It's a great
I
sport,
don't
like.
really have big. Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, no one's forcing us to do it, are they? It's some, we're looking for a bit of resistance, I think. I don't, I don't like the easy life when it comes to, if I won the lottery, would I still be training? Yeah, because I need that little bit of resistance in life, I think, like you said. But I'm not one big one for mantras or anything, but like you said about about like how you are right now, that I used to have right now written on my forearm in big races, big long, like the 24-hour races, because it was just a reminder to check, do a body check. It's like, what are my feet like? What are my knees like? What how am I right now? Because not how I was an hour ago or how I want to be in an hour. It's like, how am I right now? It's very rarely that dramatic unless you've broken an arm or something. Right now, I'm okay. So let's just go a bit forward, like you said.
Yeah, you might be going a bit slower, or might be going a bit faster, and I find I have so many, like yesterday I was on the mountains, 12 and a half of miles, about 4,500 feet. And I was coming up to the last climb coming out, and I was just spent. And so, but I knew not to, like, I'm just spent, so not to think too much about it. Got to the top of the climb, and then the run
Yeah,
back down, all of a sudden I felt like I just started again. And I'm like, oh, I love that.
yeah,
Like, I absolutely love, like, how does that
yeah,
happen? Like, there was nothing in my legs, and now I'm running again. And the mind has a
yeah,
lot to play with that, hasn't it?
yeah. It does. Yeah, I only really came to realize it when I'd had some near misses in races actually, how much it was, and then it helped. I remember like the first 24-hour race, it was like a cross country loop 10K, um, and it was so I'd been for whatever reason I'd been leading this race for about 16 hours now, and it was going into hour 20. The guy in second place, we knew from time checks, was catching on me every lap. All of a sudden, I've got this knee niggle, and it's getting a bit worse, and he's catching more. And and what happened was I was almost like willing him to pass me. I remember it now. And then I finished second in the race, which was the best kind of result that I'd had up until that point. And I remember being so relieved. Relieved is the biggest word. Relieved, but also happy that I'd finished second. Only when I started to unpack it afterwards, it was like I blamed my knee for being sore and things like this, like as you do. It's like it was 20 hours into a race. You're going to have a niggle. I was still moving. It was just that I was moving slower and this guy was catching me. And I just hadn't been in that position before. So I basically bottled it, kind of thing. And I'll tell this story to everyone because I bottled it. Because the following year, a similar thing was happening. This time, I just wasn't performing as well as the year before. I was like fourth or fifth or something. Yeah. And I'm not, again, this was one of the first times I've been in that position, so it's not like I expected to win all the time. It's just that I'd put a higher expectation on myself. So I got in a Portaloo, so it's lapped. So I went past my support crew, did the usual, carried on, but I knew where the next Portaloo was, about 2 minutes up. Got in this Portaloo, and I remember sitting there thinking, I'm going to sit here for 10 minutes, chill out, and then walk back to camp and say that I'm out because I'm injured. Yeah, that was what I was doing. I got in the Portaloo, and I think what had happened is just being in the Portaloo that had been hot all day, but now it's at night, it warmed up a bit. Back then there was only Facebook just kicking off, so I scrolled Facebook a little bit, took my mind elsewhere, and instead of going left out of the Portaloo, I turned right, and then the end of that lap turned out to be the fastest lap I had for about 10 hours, and I realised that on my watch. I was like, "This, hang on a minute, I'm actually running well again." Yeah, and I won the whole thing. I won the race, got the course record and stuff. And that's just a pure mindset shift from at the time me going me li- either living in the future, living in the past, like kind of my expectations weren't in line with where I was right now. And then I managed, it was by accident, granted, but that was a mindset shift. And then, funny enough, years down the line, I started coaching a guy called Nigel, and he's big into the chimp paradox, if you like kind of thing, and he's like
Yeah,
a
I've read it.
chimp paradox zealot. Yeah, so he's a super interesting guy, and he was trying to explain to me the chimp reasons. I was like, I can give you an experience for that. I can give you an experience for that. Give you an experience for that. And between the two of us, we unpacked it all, and it was brilliant. And and I always use that story as it's not like a story for me to show off that I won a race. It's just that was the shift basically,
It was
and that was all mindset.
strange thing. Like I'm just around a 3:30 runner, and I was trying to break 3:30 in the Dublin Marathon. It's like my 5th attempt, and I just read the chimp paradox. So when I got to mile 22, and that's where I sort of learnt about the resistance thing. And instead of being this real strong, come on, you can do it, there's 4 miles left, it's like, instead I sat back and was like, well, why don't you think you can hold this pace? Do you know what I mean? You've got all the training done, everything backs up you can. You were sort of you weren't resisting the chimp, as the book would tell you. You were listening to it, and trying to not justify, but you weren't resisting the chimp in any way or form. You're saying, well, why don't you think you can hold your pace? And then my pace came back again, and it was strong. It was the first time it broke the 3:30 mark. But it's just a pure mental thing. And I think it's that element of just accepting what's going on and just adapting to that situation in that moment in time.
Yeah, I've got a mentor in business as well, but he's more like a life coach is the wrong word, because he's not at all. But he does a lot of work with mindset and stuff, and he always has this thing. He's like, if you've got a crap situation, it's nothing to do with running, but it's like how write down, how can I get enjoyment out of this situation? Yeah, and that's like what you're saying about acceptance. It's like, if it's going to happen anyway, like he used the example recently. He was going in for, he'd like have his bicep reconnected or something that he torn, and he really loves jiu-jitsu kind of thing. Yeah, so it's like, how can I get enjoyment out of this? Yeah, which might sound mushy or whatever, but things like that can make a big difference to some people. We always have, like in my own coaching group, we always have our 5 weekly wins, not running related, and everyone posts our 5 weekly wins. Now, back when I was doing more personal training kind of stuff, that was my background. I used to get people to do their daily wins. It's like a little version of journaling. It's like 5 daily wins. Don't have to be big, because if I ask you for your 5 yearly wins, you think big, yeah? When it's daily wins, it's like, oh, well, I dropped my toast and it was butter side up. Anything, but it just keeps you in a bit of a positivity, like reinforce positivity, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I'm smiling there because when I'm doing a sort of longer run, I take 5 mile markers, and I think to myself, what went well in the last 5 miles? Just think of one thing that went well. Well, that brownie was actually pretty good. Anything at all. And it's just keeping your mind in that, because there is, naturally your mind focuses on what's not good. It's the way your mind works, and it will pick up on that. And all it really is your protective mind. Your protective mind is just trying to protect your body. And that's why we live in such a comfort world this day and age. The protective mind is like, it's winning that battle. And it will sort of shut you down if there's any sort of risk to it at all. You'd be running along and you think, geez, I can't hold this pace. And you can feel your heart rate starting to go up and all this negative chatter is going through. And then all of a sudden you start slowing down. And that's just the way the human body works. But if you can,
and then when you mix that with, because it also wants to solve a problem. That's the big thing. So we're designed to solve problems. So if everything's going well, whether it's in life or running, you will find yourself a problem. That kind of thing. Yeah, you will always find a problem to try.
There has to be a problem there. There's always problems. Where's it at? You know what I mean? Like, but every now and then you go out and you have this bliss run. But it's all about confidence, isn't it? It's keeping your spirits up and staying positive. And like, if there's an element of risk there, as long as you can as long as you have that sense of confidence, and then actually it's not a problem, this is fine.
Yeah.
Being in that situation before really helps that, and being through that situation, which I think is going to be a real struggle when these races open up again. I was one of the lucky 2% that got pulled out of the lottery in UTMB,
Yeah.
which was amazing, but the only thing in the back of my head, this is going to contradict everything we just talked about, that element of doubt that's in the back of my head, is the
Yeah.
fact that I'm not getting into that difficult situation enough over the last 12 months. You can get, there's enough things going on there, which we'll talk about in a minute, about mental and your strength and your physical and your nutrition and things like that, which are really important in race day. But your experience of getting into those deep, dark places and breaking through those, you couldn't put a price tag on that. And I think people are going to struggle in 2021, not having, like I was thinking the other day, it's been November 2019 since my last long endurance race, which is mind blowing.
Same here, yeah.
So I think that was,
that, yeah.
if you went into a 100-mile race now, depending on what you've been doing yourself in the last year, I think it'll be a lot more difficult, a lot more challenging, should I say, when you get to those deeper, darker places. You're going to need to be a bit more mentally stronger than usual, because you can't just fall back onto what happened in your last race.
I think, you are right, and I think it's from what I see in my own group is that it's more the ones that haven't been in that position before. So say if it was going to be their first ultra marathon last summer, and you think how long they've had it pushed back, like I'm always trying to drum home to them, look, like, don't be scared of confidence. Like, confidence is just you building up evidence that you can do this, right? If it's a 50-mile race and your fear is that it's 50 miles, unfortunately, until you do that 50-mile race, you're not going to have that evidence. Yeah. So you can't focus on that too much. It's like all you can do is get confidence of what you've done, which is, and what you would need to do that race. So like UTMB, for example, it's a bit of the fear of the unknown, but if you had to write down the attributes of what I would need to train for the UTMB, I imagine you've got it where you live. Yeah. To an extent. So you can start to tick things off. It's like, well, I've got that. I'm not living where I'm restricted to 5K and I live in a city and all this kind of thing, which people will have. And actually sometimes that nervous excitement there's a fine line between how nervous people get and excitement. It's like the same physical response. So I'll just tell them, we're just excited. That kind of thing. Yeah. Just fool yourself into saying you're excited, because it's if you 100% knew that UTMB was happening on the day they said this year, you would probably be more at peace with it. It's just the fear of it not happening almost, yeah, which I get, and isn't. And we could talk about mindset for days, and you probably wouldn't you wouldn't change a lot in that respect, because it's out of your control. You've got zero control on whether UTMB happens. Yeah.
No, I to be fair, I don't know if I can talk about myself, I suppose, but it's I just accept things, that I've used that word too many times already, but if it's outside of my control, I'm okay with that. I'm not like, if UTMB was cancelled next week, I wouldn't even be disappointed. I know it's going to come at some stage. I'm confident in that, but we don't have much time. The only concern I do have with that is the aspect of, being out of racing for such a long time. So a couple
for me, I'm in the TDS the same week, and the Mont Blanc 90, it's even sooner. But for me, I wasn't entering those races to try and win. I was entering for the experience of it. And I think if my worry is that my experience of the races are going to be tainted more than anything. I love trail running and ultra running for the experiences. Yes, I like to be competitive, but if I wanted to be competitive, I'd cherry pick races that I could probably do well at. I wanted to go there to experience the whole thing. So I have similar kind of worries, but my worries like, am I actually going to enjoy this? Do I want to
Yeah.
go through all this just to not have the same experience? So I guess we've all got different things, yeah.
Yeah, I think everybody's going to be like that because of the year that we had last year. You want to be going into this in good form. This is like UTMB or TDS, like such epic races. I don't want to go
Mm.
into it at 60% or 70%. To your point, you
No.
want to go in and give it your best shot, but no matter what happens, you want to be able to enjoy the experience of that race. You don't want to get
Mm.
to the halfway point and this be a real death match like to the end, which it can be.
Yeah.
It can be. It can just flip. But in saying that, I'm making it sound like it's tomorrow. It's not. It's the end of August. So we do still have plenty of time. So one thing that's sort of coming to the forefront, with a lot of the information that's coming through, like Martin and yourself, it was great actually. Your Instagram post, I think it was the first time I seen you on Insta, when it was asking a coach a question. You went, yeah, maybe, probably,
Yeah.
and there was no specific
Yeah.
answer.
How
If
to spot a good coach, yeah.
how to spot a good
Yeah.
coach. And I had literally just done the interview with Martin Cox. And every
That was
question
probably his whole interview.
every question I asked him, he blew a raspberry. It's like, how do I answer that? Like, it was like, and when I seen your post, that was my reflection after that, was like how good a coach he was, because he's right. There is no, unless you sit down with that person, it's very hard to give an answer. You need to know the background, what their goals are, where they've been, what their injuries are, what their restrictions are, what their lifestyle is. There's so much packed into that. But there's that, I'm going to use the word, Martin, I'm sure he's going to listen, that holistic approach. He said, a friend of mine was laughing the other day, he said, I'm not going to use this word again, and then 2 minutes later it goes to holistic approach. So we're going to mark
what it is, isn't it?
It is like, so on that point, and I think it's one thing he did say which sort of stuck in my mind, and I hate it when people say simple things that make sense that I've never really thought of. Strength and conditioning. He said, if you're not strength and conditioning, it's to ensure that you don't get injured, so you can maintain that consistency. And it was the first time that I'd heard strength conditioning. With all these people I've interviewed and all my own running and all the magazines, I don't know why, something as simple as that, that sort of impacted me, because I am somebody who maybe I just love running the mountains. And it's really, really hard to hold back sometimes. Yesterday I went to meet a guy at the mountains and run 5 miles with him. I ended up doing 12.5 miles with him, but it was okay. The pace was easy enough and things like that. But not having the strength behind me puts me at risk.
It does. It does to a certain degree, yeah. Like, the way I look at it is, like, at some point you will have to do strength and conditioning, whether that be by choice or whether you're forced to do it out of necessity, kind of thing. Yeah, and that's how it is, because if you get injured, if it's a tendon injury or something, the most of that is going to be fixed by you doing some kind of strength and conditioning. Yeah, and it'll be more laborious, more boring than the stuff that you could have done to prevent it, because you'll have to be on a step doing calf raises, endless calf raises if you do your Achilles and that kind of thing. But I get it. I get, as runners, it's very difficult. If you go for a run, you get that short term like satisfaction. Like, the gym isn't that for most people, or doing their strength work, and me included to an extent. I started off as a personal trainer background, so at least I had a good grounding in strength and conditioning. That was my thing, in team sports. So I get why it is important. But I have to remember, even though I know how important it is, and I know enough like to be dangerous with it, I still have periods where I just totally ignore it. So I think people shouldn't be, although I will talk about it a lot as well, strength and conditioning, people shouldn't beat themselves up about it as well. Like, people aren't Olympic athletes, kind of thing. It's, if you just want to run, then that's fine. You just have to accept that at some point you're probably going to get injured and going to have to do some strength work. And again, you just go back to it, like, how can I get some enjoyment out of this? Because it's not about how heavy I can lift. It's not about how strong I can be. It's not about lifting barbells necessarily. It's just I want to be strong enough to be able to do the sport that I love. That's all it is. It's not. I don't need to set any records. I don't need to. I don't even need to get stronger. I just need to stay strong enough to be able to run and do the stuff that I enjoy. That's how I see it, anyway.
Yeah, I remember saying to my physio, you know, I want to incorporate a bit of strength and conditioning. You know, my core is really,
Mm,
really weak. And he was like, Robbie, you haven't even got enough consistency in your running. Don't worry about that yet. You know, it's, and it's all, that's why it's very important to understand the situation of the runner, isn't it? But he was 100% right.
yeah.
You know, there's no
Mm,
point trying to force in like about 3 hours a week, you know,
no.
especially on your recovery days when you should be recovering. You know, you're going and fatiguing yourself, and then I think that's what happened to me was every time I tried to do it, it's the day off that I tried to do it. And
Yeah, on your recovery.
you're fatigued as it is, you know, and you tweak this or you tweak that when you're doing it, and you're without having
Yeah.
that real structure. But there has to be like a simple introduction of basic, you know, you could group all runners to a certain level of mistakes that they all make. There's bound to be like two or three things that would benefit people, that are pretty common.
Strength wise,
Yeah.
yeah. Like the way I look at it as well, it's like I spent a bit of time just look at. I mean, you don't have to look far to see where people are getting injured on the body. Yeah, we're not getting shoulder injuries, are we? So it's like, what do we need to look after? It's stuff below the knee, so your calf and Achilles. So I'm big. People think I'm just the same record, right? The answer is calf raises to everything, yeah. But it almost kind of is to an extent. If it's your
Mm.
calf and Achilles, if you've got a history of Achilles issues, then let's work on some strength there. But then the beauty of that is you can. I have people doing it while they're brushing their teeth or while they're boiling the kettle. So it's almost like micro dosing for strength. You don't have to go and get in a car and go to a gym. I know you can't do that now, but you don't have to go and set yourself up for an hour session. Just get these reps in over a period of time, and then if you want to go a bit further, you like the relationship between the hip and the knees, like what we're doing there. Yeah, so we can do some hip thrusts, which you can do while you're watching telly. We can do some sit to stand exercises, which you can do on a bloody chair. Yeah, so you're looking at glutes, hamstrings. You're looking at some big muscle groups, some one-legged work, 15 minutes, 2 or 3 times a week. Like if you can't tell me you can't fit that in, then I would say like
Mm.
tell me your screen time on your phone. Yeah, because if you really have to, you can do a bloody calf raise while you're scrolling on Instagram if you want.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
funny you saying that. Like, so I've just left the corporate world, and we had 13 meetings in the first 2 hours of every day, which is one of the reasons why I left. But
yeah,
I'm 6'1.5" as it is, and
yeah,
these are circled stand up meetings around boards, and I'm sitting there going up and down on my calves, and they're all looking at me, and I'm like, I don't care.
yeah,
But it's all time management is a huge thing, isn't it? There's always time. Like
yeah,
there's absolutely. I love it when Arnold Schwarzenegger said, you know, people says, yeah, but I have to sleep, and he's like, well, just sleep faster. I thought
yeah,
that was hilarious.
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
but there is
yeah,
time. You are right. You know, you could be standing doing the dishes, brushing your teeth. You know, anything at all.
mm,
It might look strange sometimes, but what I have found, because I didn't do much of it when I did do it, I remember I had a real bad posterior tib issue one time, and it really hurt me down around the ankle, like, and it went on for about 3 or 4 weeks. And the physio was saying, like, are you doing your calf raises?
yeah,
I'm trying to, and he gave off to me, stink, and he was right. This is when I just started running, and I literally 3 or 4 days of doing it properly as he told me, and the amount of reps he told me, and it was gone. You know, I'd been struggling with,
yeah,
you know, your strength comes very, very quickly, doesn't it?
yeah. Especially with something. I mean, that can react really quickly in something like that. And you're right about it. Like it's just what people choose to do. It's like what people value more because they would much rather mess around on a foam roller or stretch in front of Coronation Street because they think that well, they're just telling themselves that story that is the benefit instead of
Mm.
doing the same equal amount of time but some strength stuff. Yeah. So if it's one of the biggest things I butt heads on online is like I'm trying to shift people from stretching and foam rolling and that stuff to doing like picking something up.
We talked about strength and conditioning there,
Yeah.
and how important that can be. What about stretching? How important do you think that is in your routine?
It's just not. It's not. Like I get it if you're a full-time athlete and you've ticked every other box and it makes you feel good and that kind of thing, and you haven't got a full-time job. But I'm not speaking to those people. Number one, I'm not trying to help those people. And even if you look at like if you want to go down the lines of research and things like that, there's no research to back up the fact that stretching will put a positive impact on your performance. So yeah, in there's almost no argument for stretching apart from if you enjoy it, kind of thing. Yeah, which is what people will say, and it's the same. It's the same to an extent with the foam rolling. That yeah, it's not breaking up adhesions. It's not shifting anything. It's like people will say, well, it helps me, that kind of thing. Yeah, but there's only so far you can give people slack with that because nobody really enjoys stretching. And I'm talking about just sitting there and stretching. If someone's doing Pilates or yoga and things like this, I see these as different. I see these as a bit of strength, mobility, and that's different. When it's just stretching, I will always challenge them as like, well, why are you stretching? Yeah. And it'll be something like, well, I need to be more flexible. So, okay, so talk to me how you need to be more flexible as a runner. Because like past time, it's really not the case, to be honest. Do you need more range of motion? Do you need to be mobile? Yes. But for flexibility, we're not gymnasts. If we're just talking running, you don't need to be more flexible, and you're not actually making yourself more. You're not lengthening muscles or anything like that. So yeah, like I'll challenge people on stretching quite a bit because it's a bit like it's a bit like supplements with things, yeah, or some certain supplements.
It's like protein. Like, you know, there was a great program on Netflix there, you know, and they were going around there asking people, how much protein are you taking? Yeah, I'm taking about 300 grams a day. Why are you taking 300 grams a day? I don't know. You know,
Yeah.
and they done an exercise with this guy, and they significantly reduced his protein. And when they weighed him, he was expecting obviously to have lost a lot of muscle mass, and he actually had increased by 2 kilos, and he couldn't believe it. But what we're really talking about is specific training, isn't it? It's about. There's a great book there. Anybody who's has done Ironman or anything like that, Don't Think, is all about time management. You know, and this is the time I've got. How do I get the best value out of that time? You know, and a good example of it was we were in the gym, and it's all about what your goal is, isn't it? Being very honest with yourself on what your specific goal is, and then how much time have I got, and what is the best thing I can do within that time to give me the best value towards my goal.
And how can you be with it, kind of thing? Yeah, it's not like going to the gym and doing 2 hours once every 2 weeks is nothing, is it? It's not. You want to be doing those. If you've got 15 minutes 3 times a week, then brilliant. We can work with that and start there. It's not about having to box off an hour and a half or whatever you think it is for your strength sessions. And you're right. It's about if someone's. It's a bit like, again, going back to that coaching role. It's what strength should I be doing for this, or what strength session should I be doing? And it's, well, I'll come back to you with 10 times the questions, really. It's like, well, when can you train? How long can you train for? What have you done in the past? What is it you're training for? Do you know your strengths and weaknesses? And then very quickly you can build a picture of yourself of where you'd be best placed to do it. And then once you've got that, you can go forward with it and make a bit of progress. And then once you make a bit of progress, then you're more inclined to do it. Yeah. If you just throw in stuff at the wall randomly, then you're not going to stick to it, are you?
That's how a coach can significantly help you, I think. Weight loss is a really good example of that. You know, you've got all these people going to Weight Watchers or this and that, you know, and it's like, you know, people will tell me they're doing this and they're doing that. I'm like, but why are you doing that? What benefit is that giving you? And it's a genuine question I'm asking because I don't know. But somebody's told you to do that and you don't know. But you're
Mm.
paying them whatever, £40 a month every month for the last 8 years. Something's not really working there.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it really is. I'm somebody who really, more so now, I think, as I'm realizing how much when you're going into longer endurance races, your weaknesses do really come out. That you want to really find out more about what you're doing and why. Like, I have a slight niggle on the outside of my knee at the minute, and I went to see the physio last week. He's a great physio. He was in the Premiership, and he's given me some exercises to do.
Yeah.
And I'm kicking myself because I didn't ask him, what was actually causing that? Is that an overloading in my lower calf? Is it because I haven't got the same. I'm doing the exercises because he's told me to do them.
Mm.
But it's not like, oh, it's great I'm doing this because this is going to strengthen whatever, to stop that overload happening. The niggle only comes when it's every time I hit 7,000 feet of climbing on the descending for some reason. And like on Sunday, I just got 2 more peaks to go. I got to one from last peak, and I could feel it starting to flare. And I looked at my watch; it was 6,890 feet, and I'm like, why? It's like, why is it happening at 7,000 feet? But it's important to know why, I think, because then you're more invested in what you're doing.
Yeah, and you're right. Like I like it when I go and see my physio. Like my physio is a link that I made through Martin. They're good friends. He's a great physio, but I probably get on his nerves because I'll turn up at Duncan's practice and I'll or whatever, or need treatment. But for that hour that I'm with him, I'm picking his brain. We're having a conversation, but I'm valuing that time with kind of thing. It's like if I have a phone call with Martin, we might just be talking about, we'll not even talk about running, but still I'll value that time with him because I want to know why things are happening and things like this. Like going to a physio, it's almost like it's the most cost-effective way of learning about strength and your body and things like that when it comes to running. A good physio, I think.
It's funny, like I started running actually in 2011, so I was quite a late comer.
Yeah.
I don't even think I knew what my quads or my calves were. Now I know
Yeah.
every single, every little muscle and ligament from the waist down and some above as well. So you really do get good knowledge. Like, and you come to the point now, and it just shows you how much I've done it all so wrong. Like, but new runners, and you're like, that's your posterior tib doing that, or that's your IT bands. You need to sort of stretch them glutes out a bit or do a bit of strength. It's it's strange, that learning curve that you go through. One thing that really gets me, and I actually contacted a coach this morning about it who doesn't really actually focus on it, but is nutrition.
Yeah.
What a pain in the ass, like on these longer endurance events where it's really hard to test that for 15, 16, 20 hours, and I sort of have a balance of where I can eat. Like, I'm now eating brown sauce and cheese sandwiches when I'm going out, just to keep my stomach settled for the other crap that I'm sticking in. But it's such a minefield, isn't it? Like, how do you guide people in nutrition?
Yeah, yes, to a point. So, like, again, from when I was a personal trainer, I wasn't too run specific. Runners were drawn to me because of how I looked and how I acted in the gym, basically. Yeah. But as a personal trainer, what got me the results was nutrition. Seeing me once a week doing some burpees and lifting some weights and throwing a kettlebell around isn't going to change your life. It isn't going to change your body shape. So quite quickly, I knew that it was, one, the nutrition, but more importantly, how am I going to get them to stick to it and all that kind of stuff. So again, that was mindset based, which is what I took forward. When it came to running, because I'd already learned a bit about nutrition, I was almost one of these people that, like, I'll fully admit, I thought I knew more than I did, kind of thing. Yeah. When it goes to nutrition, the more that you know, I think the more that it's an old saying, the more that you realize that you don't know, kind of thing. Yeah. So, but the good thing about nutrition, I think, that you can. There's people, there's people doing great research out there, and it's backed by science to a certain degree. So if either yourself can go and hunt out that research, or you've got friends and things like that can do it, or good resources, then it's not always trial and error. Yeah, it's not. That is one of the things. Although it's always changing, there is underlying principles in it that we can rely on almost. The same as when it's calories with weight loss. There's similar kind of principles in training. Yeah. And I think we lose sight of that when we're trying to. We all think we're this special butterfly. Yeah. And yes, we are different to a point. I fully accept that, but it doesn't change the underlying principles. Yeah, it's something
it's like when you sweat, you lose salt. You're losing electrolytes. You need to replace your electrolytes. There's some basic things that you can apply that applies to us all. And like sugar does pick you up and sugar does drop you, and there's all these things, but there are, like, electrolyte has come up a few times now in the last few podcasts, and it's not something that I've heard people talking about, even though we take our high five electrolyte tablets, or we take salt tablets, or whatever that is. Like I remember one of my first ultra marathons. It was a 52-mile race across the mountains, and I was just gone. I couldn't eat. My stomach had bloated out, and this girl had given me magnesium, and it was like a lemon flavor. It was like lemon sherbet. I thought this was amazing, like, but it just brought me right back round again.
Yeah.
And I chased after and took another 3 or 4 off her, but it took me through the rest of the race.
Our body wants to be in balance, doesn't it? That's what it wants. It wants to be in balance. So it's, again, people get it wrong with like whether it's just hydration or whether it's electrolytes. We're trying to balance things out. We're not trying to load ourselves with anything and things like that. It's just looking for balance, really. Yeah.
But I think that's the reason why. Well, it is the reason why I contacted the coach, because
you've spoke to Robbie though, have you? You've spoken in the past.
I have, yeah.
You speak to him about electrolytes. There's your day gone.
I didn't want to have any edits, but Robbie's actually the person I talked to this morning.
Well, I've been phoning him today as well, actually.
Have you? So I know the reason why I didn't want to mention that was because he doesn't want to start doing nutritional coaching yet until he's finished.
It's very difficult. It's like Robbie's going through that course to give him the backing. Like years ago, I was insured as a nutritionist personally, but what I quickly realised is, because I've got friends who are very good dietitians as well, and there's a big difference. Like and what I realised is I was insured to give advice, kind of things, but I'm only happy giving advice that I know won't give people harm and stuff like that, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Whereas Robbie can give me those basic bits of advice that we were talking about. And I said to Robbie, I'm not a needy disciple.
Yeah.
I just want to know the basics, so I've got an idea and I can play with that myself,
Yeah.
And it has to be trial and error and a little bit of feedback on guidance on why it went tits up yesterday, on the basic level without...
by luck, that's the thing. It's not, I mean, some of it is bad luck, but again, when you take someone, like use Robbie as an example as well, like if you take someone with that kind of experience for one, because he's been there, he's chucked his guts up hundreds of times, but he's willing to put himself and get deep dive into it as well. So there's like applied knowledge, but he'll happily be challenged as well, that kind of thing, and have a conversation. So then I think what you come out with is, like you say, some people want a basic underlying knowledge. And like the people in my group, if you're doing high intensity stuff, here's the carbs and what you should be kind of aiming for. It's not that you should be there straight away, but 15 years ago, I was that guy on the canal spewing up because I'd necked 4 gels in 30 minutes. Yeah. So it was my gut that was the problem. So it's how can I train my gut, that kind of thing. And that's just what I went down. It's like, right, how can I train my gut to tolerate this?
But how can you do that? That's a question I had in the back of my head. I'm glad you brought that up because I actually forgot. Because I've heard a few people saying that now. Like we had George Foster on the podcast last week. And he talked about training his gut, and well, everybody's connected to Martin Cox is going to be saying that. Beth was the same as well.
all these are going to be the same podcast. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm now stalking Martin. That's what I'm doing, like getting as much information. But because
That actually
I used to be able to take gels really well.
don't really change because you've got Robbie, you've got George, you've got Beth, you've got Martin. Like I will probably preach very similar things, and they don't really change. Yeah, there's variations and things, but it's how do you get there? Like training your gut, for example. Like you said, like I've been in that race where I was just eating nuts and seeds essentially. Yeah, like I was in third place at the time. I was doing well, and then I hit the obviously inevitable energy drop, and then I necked a Coke and an ice cream out of some random shop.
Yeah.
Yeah, 30 minutes later, in someone's back garden, white as a sheet, and I'm being carted off. Yeah, so it's like that was a turning point as well. You have these things like, but it's not like I went back there and did that. I didn't blame anything else. I was like, why did that happen? Yeah, because I was running strong, I was fine. That happened for a reason. And then luckily with just going down the line of speaking to people that I trusted and researching myself, I need to train my gut. And it's not about jumping from one gel every 2 hours to 4 gels an hour kind of thing. For me, there are, that's where you want to be at if you're doing high intensity work over X amount of hours. But if someone says to me, I'm only taking 20 grams an hour of carb or less than that, like, well, can we get you to 30 grams in training? And then can we get you to 40 grams? And how are you taking that in? Have you given this product that you're trying out time? So that's another thing that people will have a product once and it doesn't agree with them, and then they blame the product maybe, yeah. And where it could be like, for me, I used to get people to do this thing where you try it over a period of like six times, yeah, 6 long runs where you're trying to increase it a bit. If you're sick or you feel if it doesn't agree with you, I don't care, just try it, because unless you give your gut a chance to adapt to it, you almost don't know. Yeah, your gut is going to reject anything that causes stress, whether it's because it's too hot, whether your training intensity is higher than usual, whether it's just something completely random that you've never had before. Like, it's not surprising that our gut rejects these things. So it's like, how can I get to the point where I can absorb more? Is it through liquid? Is it through bars? Is it a different gel kind of thing? But too many people, in my opinion, will go, well, I'll just have a pork pie because I can eat a pork pie. So, but again, going back to the science and the research, and the people way more brainy than me will tell us kind of otherwise consistently. So I'd much rather try and at least move the needle that way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, when you say train the gut, then it's you want to try and get a certain amount of calories in and electrolytes in. It's working out that puzzle or whatever that combination is. What type of fuels can give you that, or is it like if I have a particular gel that works well, but then after 6 or 7 hours it mightn't do. Will my gut get used to that after a while, or is it just you should stop taking that gel after 5 hours and then start fueling with something else, which is another substitute?
So, yeah, I mean, you could get into the weeds all day about it, couldn't you? But like, you will have outliers that just their gut is really predisposed to not being able to tolerate anything, and that's almost that is a big problem. Yeah, that's kind of thing. But for the majority of the people, they can like, we know through science that at the moment it suggests like 60 to 90 grams of carbs per hour from the start is where we should be at for high intensity training or running. So if we trust the scientists here rather than like Dave Facebook that's saying about pork pies, then we can at least start to work towards that. Yeah, and there's a reason why Kipchoge kind of slows down in marathon towards the end. It's not because he's not strong enough or mobile enough. Yeah, it's just we can't keep that energy up enough. We can't get the glycogen to the muscles quick enough. That kind of. So that is a real issue for people that really can't tolerate it. So unfortunately it's just having the patience to keep at it to an extent.
Yeah.
And again, I'm really wary these days of saying go and have 90 grams of carbs per hour, because people will throw that in my face when they can't do it. But it's like I said, right, if you're at 20 grams, let's try 30 grams, yeah, or 20 grams plus another 20 grams from liquid, that kind of thing, yeah. And then yeah, and it is a bit of persistence, because there's not many people at the top of our sport. Because like I've been lucky enough to run with Beth and feed her on the Bob Graham round, and the most impressive thing was how much was a tolerance for getting it down. Yeah, speak to someone like Beth, you'll say, well, I felt like, well, she wouldn't say shit. She's nicer than me. I felt awful for that 5 minutes doing it or after it, but I know that it will benefit later on in this race, or Bob Graham, whatever it is. Yeah, and George is probably the same. Like we know that is optimal. Call it, I hate that word, but it's like, how close can I get to that? Yeah, for me personally, I've got to the point now. So if I did the Dragons back 5 days, I did that on gels essentially. Yeah, and I was up to 60, 90 grams of gels, but the caveat to that is I need solid food when it's over that period of time as well. So I would have flapjack. I carry Parmesan with me, kind of thing, because I need to offset. I hate that feeling of hunger when I'm training. So
I take little baby bells with me. I think they're great because it just gives you this full type of feeling, which is settling on the stomach then.
Exactly that. And the only reason I'm doing that is to allow me to have more carbohydrate per hour. Because if I feel hungry and I feel sick and I feel nauseous, it's less likely that I can take those gels.
That was the brain. That was the brain sauce sandwich and cheese, by the way. It was just to keep the stomach settled, so I can keep on feeding my stomach.
But some people will take the brown sauce sandwich bit and think, well, yeah, Robbie just has brown sauce sandwiches, so I'm just gonna have that. Yeah, it's a bit like you hear about Camille Herron. Oh, she has the tacos and beer or whatever it is. Yeah. And you think that she fuels herself on tacos and beer. She doesn't. You'd be insane if you thought that was the case.
Yeah. They publicize it that way as well, which is a real problem. Like, but talking about your gut, like I used to love Cliff Blocks and like High Five gels, and my stomach then just after one bad race, one time it rejected them, and it couldn't. I actually couldn't take any gels after that at all, or anything sweet, and it was a real problem for me. I'd really hit a wall. All of a sudden, this thing that was feeling well with, I couldn't take anything similar to that. So I started looking at gut health, but this is maybe a year later when I was like, I've got a problem here. I can't fuel after 6 or 7 hours. I was going to sound like I knew what I was talking about there, but I can't remember what it's called. But the bio.
Microbio and stuff.
Microbio and stuff like that. And I started taking that, and that really helped to repair my stomach, which allowed me then. Now I'm back on gels again, which is great. But it's because I take a sachet of that every morning, which really, really helps. So gut health for a runner, especially an endurance runner who can pile a lot of crap in their stomach over 24 hours, it's really, really important. Like, because fuel's everything. And when I take people out into the mountains. For a quick trot round, better athletes than me, and we come back and they're tired and they're struggling coming up on the last climb, and I'm not. I always stop them at the end. So just to be aware, it wasn't that intense what we just done. You're a lot faster than I am over a longer distance, but your fuel is what's slowing you down. And that's why you're not feeling really energized now when I am. And like these guys would whip me in a race, but there's a lot of climbing which was absorbing a lot of energy. And because it's over a short period, they're not consuming as much as they should be, and it's a real good awareness. Like, fuel is everything. Like,
it is to a point, and it's really important because people, again, like I coach a lot of people, but my main focus is when they get to a race. Not my main focus, but I really want them to enjoy their experience, right? And I want them to have these days out in the mountains where they enjoy these experiences. For some reason, some people think that it has to be about survival and all this kind of thing. And you can go out and enjoy these races. And yes, I know that on the face of it, neck and gel, but kind of neither is being face down in a ditch, being drained of energy, knowing that you've got another 5 hours to like death march back to the finish, is it? There's like only so many times that you can do that before things. something needs to change, I think. And usually it is the biggest win can be in your nutrition, and it can, that's it, to just talking about the race. Now, that's before you even start about how are you feeling your training, how are
Mhm.
you feeling your life, kind of thing. Because the running should be the enjoyment thing, and it's
It's fun.
like you said, ultra running isn't healthy. Yeah, no, you can't. Going for 100-mile run in the mountains is healthy. That bit is unhealthy. Um, so the rest of it, when you're just training in life and stuff, you should try and be a bit healthy.
It's funny there because I met Ian Keith after a race at UTMB, and he had come third in his age group. You know,
Yeah.
Ian Keith had won UTMB Oman that season as well. And I said to him, like, because, I'd stopped accepting the suffering. I goes, and that's the
Mhm.
trick. It was a different level of suffering for me. And he went, no, that isn't the trick, Robbie. The trick is to avoid the suffering.
Yeah.
Make sure you're fueling properly and enjoy the race. And I was
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, okay. And he is 100% right. It's about, like, if you're not, you can't go into a race setting thinking, 3/4 of the way through this, it's going to become a death march and a
Mm.
deep dark hole, like, and because why would you do it? It's gonna,
Yeah.
yes, it's part of it and it comes up and you like that challenge, but you don't want to be that, you don't want to have that, you don't want to walk the last 20 miles in, you
No.
know.
Oh, that's not ultra running to me. I know people will say, people like to, like, again, badge of honor, like death march to the finish and things like that. But wouldn't you much rather feel at least strong or comfortable going into the finish? Yeah. Yeah. There's when you're without going again, without banging on too much about fuel. It doesn't have to be as complicated as people make out. If I'm honest, it's just finding. Yes, you do need to find what works for you, but it's within the basic principles to an extent. You can argue some people will need less for various factors and things like this, but yeah, it's not all about just death marching to each checkpoint, having a pork pie, and a death marching to the next checkpoint.
I'm gonna drop
Um,
my head in shame here. But you are right.
if you're challenging yourself, aren't you? You're thinking, well, there must be more to it than that a little bit, and at some point, most people will get to that, I think.
Yeah, I think I'm about 3 years away from where I want to be. And unfortunately, COVID sort of derailed that.
Yeah,
Because I was like fueling to 8 hours and then I got it to 12 hours. And my race was being marked by that. Then I got to
yeah,
16 hours. And then I did a race in actually North Wales, the Rebellion. It was
yeah,
called 75-mile race. And I'd got to like 18 hours before I started feeling sick. And that was such a like,
yeah.
that I was getting further and further every single race, but I do feel it's going to take me 2 or 3 years to actually understand actually what works well for me. And that's what I love about the ultra
Mm,
type of endurance race. I'm never going to be up the front.
no,
Well,
but
maybe when I hit, I have it in my head that when I hit, if I can still stay running when I'm about 80, I might
yeah,
get an age group win.
yeah. That's what I tell myself as well. Yeah, but unfortunately, people keep getting faster in the age group above as well.
So, have you any races planned for this year?
um, yeah, well, it's essentially a redo of last year, like everyone. There's Mont Blanc 90K, which is in June, and TDS, which is end of August. Like a bit like you, I'm at the point where it would just be a bonus if they happen. To be
Mm,
honest, if the one in June doesn't happen, I'm probably going to do a Paddy Buckley round instead, because like as of this weekend, I'm allowed back into the mountains. I'm probably like 30 minutes from Snowdonia,
brilliant.
if that. Like the bigger mountains. I'm lucky. I've got hills, but now as of like Saturday, I can get out into the proper mountains. So I've almost like got rejuvenation there. So I'll be happy for a couple of months doing that. If Mont Blanc happens, then I'll go there. If it doesn't happen, I'll do a Paddy Buckley, and then yeah, you're almost looking at, well, hopefully August will happen. But again, I don't mind if it doesn't.
Mm.
There's plenty of racing in Wales that I can do that probably will happen due to restrictions and things. So I don't have to worry about can I get to France and stuff. Um, like you said, it will happen. some point, and I'll be able to go at some point. I've been running long enough to think I don't mind if it's this year or next
Yeah,
year or
yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
Yeah,
It's a difficult thing, like, because I did book the flight. It was only like 100 quid, like, to book the flights,
yeah,
but I booked it on my own because of
yeah,
the complication of bringing the family over and things like that, which is
yeah.
a bit disappointing. I'm also registered for Lavaredo, which moved over from last year.
Right. Yeah,
I'm not going to be ready for that in June based on,
yeah.
well, I'm only just coming back myself and things like that. And I'd already moved my hotel and all to next year, which was great. But they gave me an email yesterday. No, it looks like it might be going ahead, and I'm like, oh, please move it to next year. Like, please move it
Yeah.
to next. There's so much. There's still a lot of uncertainty, but it's out of our control. So you just accept what you can do. If you can get out in the hills and you can run, just enjoy it. I think
I'm
that's the
looking for.
message.
I know, like, speaking for Wales, I know that the events going forward immediately will be like limited to 100 people and things like this. And for me, like, that'd be great.
Mm.
I just want to get back and see some people racing and running or whatever and run hard. I don't really need a race. Like, I speak to this about Martin a lot, kind of thing. I've stayed quite consistent through lockdown. I don't need a race to motivate me to train. I'm still, yeah, still done okay and that kind of thing. It's more, I do want to see people back racing and stuff because I can see it in my own group, kind of thing. Yeah, and it's only down to uncertainty. If we knew a year ago that we definitely have racing back at this point, people would probably be okay with it or better with it.
But it's great
Yeah,
though. Yeah, I've set up 3 challenges locally. I've
yeah,
set a bell up, which is great, and you go and run the 7 mountains over 700 meters. Only there's one of the 700s is actually only 684. I only found that out in 2004, but we still call it the 7 sevens.
yeah,
And we have the Mourne Wall here, which is great. You know, it's 21 miles and 2,970 meters. And you ring the bell and you go and do it and you come and stop. And I've actually loved that. You know, there was
yeah,
eight people done the wall yesterday. One person broke the record just now on the 7 sevens. I think it was 5 hours 45 minutes, which is going to get smashed. By the way, it's going to be somebody's going to do it under 4 hours. But to have that exciting buzz when they come back again,
yeah,
you know, they've all individually had their race and tried to get a time and gone on the leaderboard, and it's really exciting. You know, you miss that. You miss
yeah,
that social buzz, you know, before the race and after it, and the reflection that happens and all of that, and even like we have Hill and Dales every Thursday night here.
yeah,
I missed that pint of Guinness after that. That was just an
yeah,
excuse to get out in the hills, and you always everybody went to the pub after it just for 1 or 2 pints. 1 pint if you're driving, that is, but
yeah.
but you miss that type of buzz. Gary, I think we've done a great job today. Because I can talk. I had another
Yeah.
coach on. I was like, let's not do another Martin, because me and Martin actually talked for 5 hours.
He did say 5 hours. Yeah, well, that's why I was shocked that his podcast was 2 hours. Yeah, but yeah.
It would take like 3 weeks to edit something like that. So, so I tried to. There's so much more we could have unpacked. But
Yeah.
I really appreciate your time today. Maybe get you back on again. That was good.
Yeah, I've enjoyed talking to you. Thanks, mate.
All right, Gary.